couple people are in the room right now. Feel free to say hi if you're here. Just kind of had to get a few more things together. Make sure my files are ready in Maya. Let's see. Just setting a few things up on my other screen, just so I have everything ready to go. I do have a new microphone now. I'm not sure how well it's going to work. It should be much higher end than what I had before. And you'll also notice I'm not doing video this time. Just sort of seemed unnecessary, possibly distracting. So I'm just going to stick with the screen today, and I'll see how everybody likes it. Should give you a little bit more resolution, too, on everything that I'm doing. So, hopefully most of you are past this point already. But if not, and even if you are, and you've had any issues or difficulty kind of finishing the body, I wanted to just kind of take the real blocky mesh that we had here, just do a little bit more tweaking. For our final deliveries, you know, we're going to be, a lot of our bodies are going to be covered in clothing, but it's still obviously always good to have a good base mesh underneath your clothing to sort of help block things in. Again, I know that we've already kind of moved, a lot of us have moved past this, but I just wanted to kind of recap, since we didn't get to go over any of this in class. I just wanted to kind of spend some time today working on transitioning this body. So let's see, do I not have my reference in this one? I might have to set up a new reference. Give me a second, I'm going to take a look at another file that I have, and see if I've got one with the reference set up already. I think the head demo might have it. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to just export this and bring it back in. Or now let's do this. Delete everything but the reference. Don't need the head right now. Just gonna save this so I can export it. Body ref demo, or yeah, solo. Okay, going back to my body file. Just going to import. Oh man. So I had meant to. All right, I'm gonna have by next week. I'm gonna try to get an application in here that'll tell you exactly what I'm clicking when I'm working. I don't want to do that right now because it's gonna kind of mess with the timing of everything, and I don't want to just be searching for that while working, but promise by next week I will try to have that ready. Let's see. Okay, so reference, here we go. Make sure it's got the textures. Yes, it does. I'm gonna hide this one now. Actually, I don't even need that. This camera. Let's see. Sure. Set up as reference. Just going to go to X-ray again. Alright. For this one, I'm just going to take the body, or the head out of here for now. I can append a head later. But I'm pretty sure almost everybody, a few of you might be doing characters that don't have clothing, and then, you know, you're focusing more on anatomy. But most of you, if not all of you, should be able to kind of hide the head inside of the clothing. So you can kind of, at any point, just split these things apart like I'm doing now. And you won't even have to worry about, you know, usually if you're doing like just a solid body, you'd have to come back in and make sure that your edges all line up and you have the exact amount of edges coming out down through the neck as you do in your body model. But the advantage of having clothing or something around the neck to kind of hide that is that you don't have to worry too much. So if you need to add extra topology in here, you don't have to worry about having it all line up and being perfectly, the count being exactly the same. So this should be about where you end, I think, around the end of the videos. We've started to round out a few of the shapes. The hand is still sort of blocky. The leg doesn't have all of its topology around it yet. Yeah, sure. I think so, Andy. 1 second. Okay. Is that any louder? I added I can boost the volume of the microphone a little bit. I can also just move a little bit closer to it. Let's see. Okay, cool. I'll continue with that. So as with everything else, we want to work very closely with our reference. I also have some extra reference here to look at, just to kind of, this is more, like a little bit better rendered here, that I can kind of refer to. I'm going to dock these next to each other. Okay, so that should fill in there. So I have this up just sort of ready to look at. And just like before, we're just kind of coming in and trying to line everything up with our reference. You know, over time you get a better idea as to what a human body should look like, but there's pretty much really never hurts to do this. Never hurts to have extra reference on hand. In fact, it kind of is always preferable. So I'm just going to work my way down. Most of the top of my body is properly topologized and quadded out right now, so I don't need to do a whole lot of more work on that. So that's, you know, for the rest of you, if you haven't done this yet, try to make sure, especially if you're planning on doing extraction for your clothing, try to make sure that you have this good clean topology, that you don't have edge loops that are just ending, sort of how you can see this edge loop ends here. We're going to get to that soon, but a few of you might have that on the chest area still. So try to get rid of that just using the pen to poly tool or the multi-cut tool to draw your edges. So say we had, say we had one here that just sort of died. Well, let's just continue that around, or even use insert edge loop like we've been using. And all of this is just the insert edge loop, again, as a reminder, is holding down Control and dragging along an edge, and that'll give you an edge loop, or just literally left-clicking across to add them manually like that. So I don't actually want those. That was just an example. Hello, Brent. Alright, I've got a couple of work friends on today. So, again, we're just kind of working with the silhouette first, and try to just hit the high points of your silhouette, and also just try to think about the muscle system underneath and some of the underlying shapes. You know, we could probably block a lot of this in with normal map, but if our topology already flows the way that the body flows, it's going to make it a lot easier to sell all of that. So I'm also, you'll see that I'm dragging right through, which is selecting the ones on the back. I'm going to go into the back later to work on its anatomy. For now, I'm just going to have the back more or less mirroring whatever I have in the front. So, and just hitting these high points. And nothing too challenging here. It's just kind of the usual thing with modeling, just a little bit of patience and paying attention to what you have. Again, that's Shift and Control click allows you to add to your selection. I've gone over this before, but just as a reminder, otherwise if I just Shift click, it'll invert my selection. So I don't want that right now. Move the hand up a little bit, and I'm going to scale it down. I'm holding D just to move my pivot point up, so it'll scale from that point. You can do that anytime with any selection. Once you redo the selection, it'll reset your pivot if you're doing component selections. But at any time, you can just hold D down and move that pivot around just for one quick transform. So, just get this stuff into place. Let's see. So we see that we've got some pinching here, and we can alleviate some of that with more topology, but before I add any topology, I'm going to try to just do that by pulling these up a little bit and then pulling the middle down. On our finished model, we'll probably want maybe one or two more edge loops around here. For now, I think we're okay. I'm just looking at the side profile. I need to turn on two-sided lighting. And now that I've done the chest area from the front, I'm just going to check it from the side, make sure that my posture is looking good. It needs a little bit of work right now. Again, it really is very much just like tracing for this part. We can get more into detail after this, but you want to make sure you're not really adding a ton until you've gone through this process. So shoulders are going to want to pull that back a little bit. They kind of sit more close to the back than they do to the front of the chest, especially when you've got a really heroic looking character like this, very strong character. So just kind of notice I'm working a little bit faster today because I finally got my cast off. Just making me very happy. Making this a lot easier to do, a little bit quicker. So you see, especially from the side, there are a lot of these big changes. Like this was way out of proportion. You're going to see this probably on a few parts around the body. The legs in particular are going to be quite a drastic change when we get to it. Yeah, we're going to just start up here. So some of this is guesswork. Move this up, 'cause these muscles kind of come up along the neck, so I want this topology just to be based a little bit higher. And let's see. Always trying to keep your distribution of size and of polygons kind of relatively even here. So here we're going to get to pull the arm back quite a bit. This guy's posture, he's kind of got his chest sort of thrust out a little bit and his shoulders back. So, and you'll remember in class I was talking about how we want to go with like a very slight bend for our bind pose. And this character already is in that position really well, especially with the elbows. The front is a little bit straight still, but even that, you see, there's a very, very slight bend. And actually, before the end of this, I'm going to be coming in and rotating this whole thing out for our T-pose. But first, I want to finish kind of using the reference that we have here to block everything in. So we can make a big selection here for the whole lower half of the arm, just holding Control-Shift again to add to my selection. I'm going to perspective mode now, just by holding space down as a reminder. Thank you on the congratulations on the cast. Oh, hey Riley, nice to see you. I'm sorry that karate was canceled, but I'm glad you're able to make it. And thank you on the congratulations on the cast. My life is a lot easier now. Finger is still really stiff and sore, but fortunately I don't really need my pinky to do any of this and to use a mouse, so it's no worries. So I'm just checking, obviously when I drag my selection like I did from the right side, that selected all the vertices behind it, so I'm just going through now and making sure that I deselect all the ones that I don't want. And you'll notice you kind of get a cue that you've done so when your pivot point snaps back, because when you're in selection mode, the pivot point always is in the center of your full selection. You know, so if I were to drag one vertex down here, you see the pivot jumps. So it's a good indicator that you have your selection the way that you want it. So again, holding D, I'm going to move my pivot up to about the elbow. So that's where we want to rotate from. And I'm actually going to move it back a little bit. I think I can actually come up. And then I'm just going to rotate this out. And I might actually scale this out a little bit more to get the hands where I want. The hand is too big, way too big right now. So that's going to be the next thing that I address. But right now I want to get just the wrist about where it needs to be, or the arm. So, alright. I think that's close. For now, just going to keep this right around the middle of the arm. We're definitely going to need one more edge loop in here to really get this nice curve of the forearm. You have these couple of muscles that kind of come across and attach down to the wrist. But once it hits the wrist, we lose a lot of the bulk of that muscle. So we have a nice kind of curve down into that. Elbow too, I'm going to add edge loops later, but for now I'm keeping it simple. Once I have everything blocked in, that's when I'm going to go through and add all the extra edge loops that I think I'm going to need for deformation. And I can actually even go through really, really briefly looking at smooth binding. So if I don't remember to do that, someone remind me in like 20 minutes or so. I'll do or maybe an hour. I'll do a smooth bind just to sort of test how my deformations are going to look. This is all pre-rigged. We haven't even UV'd this yet, so it's going to be a little while before that. So this guy has some pretty crazy curves back here. Not everyone's character is going to be quite this extreme. But you know, the nice thing about doing characters like this, even though they're not necessarily realistic or indicative of like how everyone's average body looks, these kind of bodies give you a very good idea of the musculature that lies underneath. Most people, you can't see things quite as well defined, but this is good practice for learning anatomy, doing bodies like this. So I'm just bringing this up a little bit, remembering that there's just a little bit of an S-curve through most bodies when they're standing. So I know I was about to do the hand, but while I'm on the side, I just kind of wanted to block everything, get everything kind of close to where it needed to be. Hey, thank you, Yali of Tig. You're just getting started. So, let's see. In this one, I think I do want to add an edge loop now, just because there's a lot going on around the knee. I just want to have just a tiny bit extra to help kind of define that. And I'm probably going to actually need 1 or 2 more edge loops before I'm done. But for now, we'll just give that one extra one. And I like to leave these markers kind of along the way as I'm working. Areas where I know that I'm going to need just a tiny bit more to really define it. So you can see from the box model that we did, the feet tend to be enormous with your initial box model. So definitely come in right away and get rid of some of that. So let's see. I think I'm gonna want to. Another thing too, you know, when you're laying out your edge loops, think about the direction and angles and whatnot that your joints are going to bend. This one's going obviously to be bending pretty much just this direction. You can kind of go side to side a tiny bit with the ankle, but very, very, very little, like almost not at all. So the pivot really is right around the ankle, because that's obviously where your bone's at, where your where the leg ends, the foot begins. So you kind of are going to have this diagonal line right across here. Not that steep, but you kind of want to, you know, it's good to have that, because when we start deforming, that's what's going to bend around. Let's see. You know, that'll give us kind of a natural bend. And we'll have another edge loop in here before we do a bind that's going to prevent this really long edge from bending like that, because obviously we're not going to want that. But we'll get to that in a bit. So, already our side profile is looking pretty good. I'm going to put one more edge loop in the neck, just so we can define this just a little bit more. I think this is going to have to come back a little bit. Let's see. Bring this up a little bit. Get the so we'll have some topology to work on our shoulder bones. Bring this up just a little bit more. Now I'm definitely going to need another edge loop through here to do the collarbone. I'm not going to get to that quite yet, but that's going to be something I'm definitely going to try to get to today. Let's go back to the front for a little bit. And rather than doing dragging now, because I don't want to select the verts that are behind, well, I'll drag carefully. But I'm going to be doing a lot more of just clicking to kind of make sure that I'm only getting the ones that I want. So it looks like some of these got out of place when I was working on the side view. So it's always good to kind of go back and forth between these two views from time to time. 'Cause something might look right from the side, and then you realize that you took it a little bit too far. So this needs to come up. This is a much sharper angle. Another way that you can work, I'm working right now with my outliner up here, but if I hold space down over that, I can set this as my right side. This is my front. I know that we went over this in class, but Maya stores the settings based off of the actual window, which can be frustrating or disorienting at first, but it's actually pretty useful because it allows you to have, you know, if you want different views, or say you wanted like an X-ray of the front, but a rendered view of the front here, you can actually have, you know, you can show both of those things. So in my case, I want the X-ray turned on for both of them, and I want texture turned on, so I'm just hitting 6 to turn texture on. And now I can see exactly what I'm doing from both sides. All right, taking a look. Hey, Corey, how you doing? Riley, I'm not really sure. I think, I don't know if anyone else can chime in if I'm cutting out a lot. I would imagine I'm pretty well connected over here right now, so I'm guessing the lag might be from UMBC's. I really can't say for sure, but hopefully it'll just kind of stay stable. I'm also, just a reminder, I'm about there's about a 10-second delay on the stream, so you'll see me responding a little bit later to some of the chat. That's why. So another advantage of adding this extra edge loop here on the neck is that we can kind of, from the front now, pull this in a little bit, get this a little bit closer. And this should actually angle down a decent amount, because the loop kind of comes around and into the neck. There's always this sort of slant. Pull this up just a little bit, and then pull them both back down. And I'm just trying to make sure that all of these curves are, you know, not too sudden, that everything flows into the next vertex very well. You'll notice again, I'm not really using smooth preview too much, because you shouldn't need it too much when you're doing this pass. It can cause problems. It can make things a little bit more confusing, and it also sort of tempts you to add more and more edge loops to tighten things up, and you don't really want to do that yet. Alright, so when defining the body, when is there too much or too little topology detail to make the clothing? It's kind of a judgment call on your part. I would suggest, especially if you're covering the body with a lot of clothing, I wouldn't really take the topology much further than this. Because you're still going to want to do some changes to your topology to make the clothing work. And the fewer polygons that you have, the easier it's going to be to go in and manipulate and make those changes. So really keeping it about this level is probably pretty good for extracting your clothing. You could maybe go a few more edge loops than this, but I really wouldn't do many more. I definitely can add one here. But yeah, you really don't want to go too much past this. Just kind of, I think the rule, not that there's like a serious rule, but like the rule that I try to keep for myself is, well, kind of two things. I don't add too much unless like I'm hitting a line that I really just can't get without more topology. There's that, and then there's also when I need to even things out. So for instance, I just put this edge loop across here. The reason that I did that is because I had a huge gap between here and here that gave me kind of an inconsistent distribution of polygons across the model. Again, you don't always need a super even distribution, but particularly if you're working in a ZBrush pipeline, which I know that we're not right now, but you know, eventually if you really stick with character art, that's definitely going to be something that you're getting into. It's much easier to sculpt and cleaner and just better to sculpt if you have very even topology throughout the mesh. When you do the topology for your game mesh, you might try to prioritize detail areas and kind of reduce polygons in areas that aren't going to be deforming that much. But it's particularly when you're starting out, it's really good to have a pretty even distribution. But keeping it as low as you can before really having to take it too much further. All right, so perfect example of this right now. I'm going to turn my reference off. This leg just simply doesn't have enough to define what I need to define right now. I have, you know, the leg definitely has a good roundness to the front. Let me see if I can get a good reference of that. Let's see. That might be the only one I have. You know, we all have legs too. We can look at our own legs and get an idea. Most of us have legs. I don't mean to discriminate against those of us who do not. But for the most part, you know, legs are pretty much tubes. You do have flat faces, and like there is a little bit of a sharper curve around the edges of them for the most. But the front, like the front side, you actually do get a very, very round curve. Obviously, we just don't have enough of that right now. We have enough to sort of round out the sides, but we don't really have enough for the front. And the way that we did our box mesh, we have this edge loop here that came off of our hip that just kind of goes nowhere. So that's a perfect candidate for adding a little bit more topology. I'm going to turn my reference back on and turn X-ray back on and texture by hitting 6. Yeah. And I can actually, I'm going to bring some of this up before we get to that. So we really want to have a couple edge loops to be able to define our rib cage. I think I'm actually, let's see. I need to bring this one up here. Again, not everybody's body is quite this well defined, so your character might not have so much of this, these stark lines. Let's see, any questions? No, we're doing good. Bring this up a little bit. Again, I'm kind of thinking about rotation, and you know, our hip bone and connects to the femur like right around here. So that's going to kind of be our pivot point, and then just, you know, we want this diagonal across here because that's where a lot of the deformation is going to happen. So I'm just going to space these out a little bit. You can see I added just a few extra edge loops and detail to sort of help myself define this this transitional area. Transitional areas are always kind of where you're going to find a few of these extra polygons and find a few of the star junctions, which is where we have 5 edges coming into a point. That's just how it is. There's kind of no other way around that. So again, just trying to make this line kind of follow where I'm going to be deforming things. Again, you might have clothing that's going to cover all this, but if you have geometry under here already that's in the right shape, it's going to make that deformation a lot easier, and it's going to kind of set your clothing up well. So this is the butt. I'm just kind of reaching through to the back of the model a little bit right now, just because I can see it, and I know that some of this stuff needs to come out a little bit. So I'll get back to that part later. All right, so I'm going to go to our multi-cut tool, and just holding Control and Shift to snap, I'm going to draw an edge loop right down the middle. I'm just going to connect that just by left-clicking from one vertex to the next and hitting Enter. And let's just make sure that we mirror that same exact thing in the back. So you can see in the back right now, I actually have one extra edge loop that I brought down from the neck that I'm going to need to do something about. So I think what I'm going to do is delete this edge. I'm going to snap these two together. I merge these two. And then I'm going to try to eliminate this another way. So sometimes this is kind of the part where everyone's going to kind of do this stuff a little bit differently. I've got some weird topology here right now, and I'm actually just going to delete this too and get an edge loop going around here because I can afford one more, and that'll help me kind of define the hip a little bit better. I'm going to draw this one to here. And then let's see. For now, I'm just going to end this up here. I have a triangle here, but I'm probably going to be able to hide that pretty easily. But for now, I'm just going to leave that triangle. Triangles are not the worst. The n-gons are the worst. Again, I know that this is going to get kind of covered, so it's not too big of a deal at this particular moment. You can see I had the intention of doing the leg. A lot of the times this is just sort of how I work. I see something, and I don't want to forget about what I just saw. So I'll try to take care of it as much as I can, kind of up front. Let's see. I can't remember if I talked about this one before, but one of Maya's new features, which is really nice, at least maybe a year or two old, is they've added these planes. So before you had to kind of hold control down on one of these, and that would give you the selection on just that plane. But it's a nice way of knowing that, like, okay, you know, sometimes if you just grab it in the middle, you might be sending it really far back in Z space. But if you do this, you know that it's only going to be moving on X and Y and not on Z at all. So anyway, let's see what we've got here. Pull this up a little bit. Think about this too. There's not a whole lot of deformation going on. I mean, the butt kind of really takes up a lot of, just kind of a big muscle here that goes right into the back. So we can kind of spread this out a little bit more. Let's take a look. Yeah, you've got that. So I probably don't even need, I don't think I need this. I'm going to delete that. Again, for anyone watching at home, just double click to select the edge loop, and then I've docked delete selected poly components up here. You can also do it through mesh tool or edit mesh, delete edge and vertex. Because by default, when I do this, I've gone over this before, if I just delete the edges, it leaves the vertices behind. So I always just dock that tool up here and just use that when I want to delete edge loops. So now I have to think, you know, do I want to run this edge loop all the way up through the back? I'm low poly enough that I can, and this is kind of another reason that it's nice to work low poly. Sometimes you just sort of end up with these areas where you don't remember how you got to it, but you have an edge loop that just sort of ends somewhere, and you've got this n-gon you have to take care of. And if you have a low poly model, it's not the end of the world if you have to add one more edge loop. So that's just what I'm going to do right now. I could probably get rid of this later. But for now, I think that's fine. That allows me to clean this up and quad the model out just a little bit more. Another piece of advice, this is just sort of a random piece of advice, but I know this is something that I struggled with for a little while. Don't really, you know, really try not to be afraid of having to redo stuff, especially little things like that. You know, I'm leaving this open. I have an extra edge loop right here that I might want to get rid of later. But I can just do that later. It's not really a big deal to have to go back and manage this at the end of the, you know, at the end of the modeling process. Sometimes you just need to undo something that you've already done because you see a much better way of doing it. I could even probably get rid of this. I mean, it's nice to have these extra edges. But I could clean this up right now. And this actually gives me an opportunity to show another, two more tools that I haven't shown.